speaker. And this is Mr. Ugo Blanco. He is actually the resident representative for the United Nations Development Program, responsibility for Trinidad and Tobago, Aruba, Curacao, and St. Martin. And Ugo is going to talk to us about the role of ICTs in the sustainable development of SIDS. And I'm sure he'll tell us, I'm sure he'll also make mention of a recent seminar that the UNDP held on this same topic in preparation for SIDS 4. So, Mr. Ugo Blanco, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Nigel. Let me stand by the protocol established, but acknowledge and thank SG Taylor and CTU team for this invitation. Happy to share a couple of key messages with the participants. As you said, Nigel, we had the pleasure here in Trinidad and Tobago to co-host a regional event on digitalization for the region that is very much linked to the subjects of this agenda. So I'll be touching upon certainly some of the outcomes of those conversations with 20 countries early on this month. Sustainable development and ICT. Sustainable development, we know what it is. Practice of trying to meet our current needs without compromising the capacity to do so for the future generations. And this is about economic growth, social inclusion, and environmental protection. ICTs are the center of this conversation nowadays. Before we talk about leaving no one behind, we thought about what? We thought about geographically the isolated populations, rural areas. Now, when we talk about leaving no one behind, we think a lot about the digitally disconnected, those that don't have access to technology, to connectivity. Let me just share quickly a couple of slides to, you can see, right? Yes, very good. So I'm gonna use the next 9 minutes, 10 minutes to cover two main areas. One is how ICT contributes to sustainable development in small island states. And then what are the principles that should guide this development? On this first part on how ICT contributes to sustainable development, I'm gonna share views of the UN family, CTU, and other institutions that are really leading this area. ICT enables us to bridge the digital divide. And this is the theory. Then we can discuss how this happens in practice. But now almost anybody with a smartphone and connectivity has access to almost anything, global networks, participating in the global economy, getting services from governments. And that includes participating in education, in healthcare, in government services. And this is obvious for many of us, but for many others living in rural areas in the past, that was very complicated. They had to drive or to walk or to bike many kilometers, many miles to get to that. So ICT is changing the way we operate, the way we consume films, the way we make our payments, and the way we participate in the governance of our communities and countries. However, and this is something the previous panelists mentioned very strongly, the costs and the availability in SIDS sometimes are prohibited. And there is where we have to have a wider conversation. Is this a commodity that we buy and sell, or this is a right? And in my opinion, in our opinion, this is becoming a right. It's like flying around in between seas in the Caribbean. Is a luxury or is a need? It's a service we have to have. Then ICT is critical for promoting economic growth. Our economies are built around growth. So ICT is again at the center with new industries, new services, e-commerce, digital tourism, or even remote work opportunities that are driving economic new pillars, creating jobs and promoting resilience. This is very important for everybody, but even more for small and medium enterprises that can reach larger markets. They can improve their efficiencies and they have more tools to become more efficient. There are almost at your fingertips trainings about mobile money, about digital financial management of small and medium enterprises. There is a large platform for MSMEs that can tap into to become more competitive. And again, remember we are talking about SIDS. So going beyond the small markets, going to regional markets, and perhaps even global markets. The element of environmental sustainability. ICT is giving us new tools to monitor how we are doing in our fields, in our farms, in our natural resources, with geographic information systems and data that can help us to monitor progress, to be more efficient, but also to promote conservation of our sustainable resources. And we, SIDS, we are very vulnerable and reliant on some of these resources, even natural resources, but also those economies driven by tourism. So the relevance of ICT for managing our natural resources is critical, because climate change is here. That's not the main topic of this conversation, but we have to adapt and we have to manage the risks. And ICT help us to provide more information, more reliable information, more on-time information, and early warning systems, communications, and channel and share information. Now everybody else on WhatsApp. That help us, and everybody means virtually everybody, or at least one smartphone in the household. I'm saying this because we are working with vulnerable communities on how to make sure early warning information about disaster reach the most vulnerable, and this is fairly efficient. One of the main elements of ICT obviously is e-governance and social development. How the government, how the national institutions are revolutionizing, I think that's the word in English, the way they operate, the way they provide services. Because this is about being more transparent, being more accountable. I know who is paying what. If I got a fine, a traffic fine, I know that I have to go to this system, I have to pay there, and I know when I pay how much and to whom. And it's more efficient in public administration, fostering better governance practices. Obviously, this requires a transition. This requires building the capacity in the national institutions of the civil servants. And that's a process that SIDS needs to embrace. The second part of the e-governance is the empowering of the communities, as again, Mr. Topu mentioned it before. Let me mention here one of the main products, UNDP, sorry for the publicity here, but is a human development report. We talk about how we are doing globally. This year's report, launched last month, talks about how our world is becoming more and more polarized. Different views are leading now to tensions, and these tensions are leading to violence. And that leads us to a situation of gridlock when we become paralyzed and not much is happening. So one of the recommendations of this report is empowering communities. Why? Because now citizens don't feel part of the decision-making bodies. My opinion as citizen doesn't count. It doesn't matter what I say, what I think. Someone higher up there is going to take a decision. However, ICT facilities promote this community engagement, their participation in decision-making processes. So they're strengthening the social cohesion, the fabric, especially on marginalized groups. And we are seeing this across the region in SIDS, but also globally. And there is strong discussions about democracy and development. And I think ICT can play a main role. We are not going to be talking about miscommunication, fake news, etc., because that's probably another topic for conversation. And let me close this first part of my short presentation about the idea that ICT is critical for learning. And now, again, we are in six small countries, limited resources offer. Now, that's not the case in terms of education anymore. I can do a master's degree on anthropology from the University of Australia, Canberra. And this is at my fingertips. And this is a revolution with new skill development programs that are available to almost any of us. And obviously, this requires a new skill set in our countries. So we benefit of the digital economy and foster innovation, and will create more opportunities for enhancing employability. So all in all, ICT in SIDS can overcome the geographical and economic constraints we are used to. A small island. I don't really like that acronym, so that's why we are talking about smart island states, small island digital states. But ICT is changing the way we operate, the way we live, and the way we interact as a society. I'm conscious about my time, but let me cover, Nigel, if that's okay, another 5 minutes to mention the main principles on this ICT and sustainable development. And let me mention that this is not Ugo's or UNDP's views. This is the outcome of the high-level conference on digital pathways. Nigel, you mentioned early on, where 20 countries and territories of the Caribbean met earlier this month. And thanks to the CTU for being a great support in the conversation. And we agreed on a kind of common framework and few principles. Let me mention them very quickly. First,
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Nigel. First and foremost, society first data transformation. People have to be at the forefront of the digitization process. It's not the case everywhere. Sounds obvious, but we are realizing that that's not the case. Sometimes we go ahead with e-IDs, electronic IDs, we go ahead with e-mobile, and not enough engagement, not enough buy-in, not enough participation from communities is there. And that delays processes, and that contributes to the digital divide and their franchising. So people first, that's a key principle that I think has to lead digitalization and sustainable development in SIDS. Secondly, something CTU is leading is regional integration. As SIDS, we have to come together. We are too small to be working in silos or isolated manner. We, as Caribbean islands and SIDS, and bringing in obviously the Pacific and others, we have to come into agreements, leverage on existing institutions to strengthen national responses for us and for the region. And there is a lot of good initiatives there, sometimes not fully utilized. And I think that's an opportunity there. Third point, cybersecurity. We have to be really committed and coordinated to address cybersecurity. Big issue, big risk, a threat for systems, but a threat also for the trust citizens have in digital processes. It's not an easy one. I'm not gonna deny it, but if any solution goes through partnerships, working together, sharing best practices and resources. Number 4, something also Mr. Tupu has mentioned, is about national sovereignty and resilience. So countries here in Trinidad agree that technologies, designs and choices have to consider the sovereignty of the region, leveraging digital public goods to avoid vendor lock-ins and build the capacity of regional expertise. How we, again, as a small, we are exposed sometimes to bigger players, to the big dynamics of the market. Let's be smart, let's think long-term, not only short-term. Let's think what are the implications of the decisions we as policymakers take, and what is the impact my country, my population will have in the near future. So national sovereignty is critical. Interoperability, this has to do a lot with coming together, finding ways that we can work together across identity, payment, data flows, protection of the rights to reduce the friction and promote business opportunities. Movement of talent and sharing capacities, again, using the best we have as a region. Sorry, again, I'm thinking as a Caribbean, but this goes beyond the Caribbean. And we are talking about the free movement of people, of goods. What about the free movement of talent, so we can be a champion on some of these areas, even though we are small in terms of population? Strengthening digital ecosystems. I link this to medium and small enterprises and the need for us, the policymakers, to create enabling environments for our businesses to reach global markets. And 2 more, I close with this. response demand-driven agile technical assistance, sometimes our capacity, the capacity of our institutions are limited. We are few, handling too many priorities, too many balls in the air right now. This is complex discussions, data centers, EIDs, cybersecurity. We need technical expertise. Let's have a pool of experts that can provide this expertise to governments. And I'm happy, obviously, that to UNDP to be part of that. We have launched a facility. It's called Digital Support Facility for the Caribbean, where together with CAF, together with other partners, the Ministry of Digital Transformation, we are ready to support countries with technical assistance and others. And the last point I'll do, dear Chair, is the need for harmonization, coordination, standardization, and coherence. We have to talk the same language. We have to mean the same when we talk about interoperability, when we talk about data centers in these countries. So coming together with a common framework, a common language that help us to promote the use the shared objectives and dimensions and metrics is very, very important. And for that, the SIDS 2.0, the Small Island Digital States Initiative, with 5 digital pathways and clear dimensions and metrics, I think can help a lot to countries to assess where they are in terms of digitalization towards this SIDS 2.0, Small Island Digital States, and how they can move to the next level with the support of partners. Nigel, I think I'm up to my time, but I hope I cover the key messages. Over. Thanks again.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ugo, for that. And I think the points listed at the end were good to summarize the way in terms of moving forward. We have had a couple of comments and questions crop up here. One on the Q&A part that Mr. Tupu gave a response to relates to the need for SIDS to consider their digital infrastructure as critical infrastructure. And Mr. Tupu drew in fact, the example of Tonga's recent experience with the volcanic eruption that had them offline and incapacitated for some days. I see other comments in the chat. There was a comment to Ugo. Maybe you could look at it from Ugo from Matthew Cohen and see if you want to respond to that. And acknowledgements from Russell and Tracy in terms of, I would say positive responses to what has gone before. So I think we are going pretty well. So let me continue on for the time being. I keep forgetting to mention, as you can see in the video picture of our site here at the hotel in Antigua, there is someone sitting next to me, and this is Ms. Nia Nanan, who's our senior research analyst at the CTU Secretariat. So my apologies for not pointing out her presence to you earlier.